Book Talk begins at 25 minutes and 59 seconds.
Welcome to CraftLit, the podcast for crafters who love books. My name is Heather Ordover, and I'm podcasting from where the Delaware River meets the Old York Road, New Hope, Pennsylvania.
Episode 646, What I Did. This episode of CraftLit is brought to you by so many travelers on CraftLit tours: Claire Wade, Candace Funston, Kim Friedman, Jean Bates, Nicole Jordan. Thank you so much for your support. And a big welcome to new patron, Jamie Todhunter, a name that I have seen around for so long. Thank you, Jamie. Well, hello. How are you? I woke up this morning. That probably doesn't sound like such an exciting thing, but I woke up early the way that I used to. And I was able to go to the Tuesday morning Zoom, which was lovely. And I am feeling a little bit like myself. However, the problem with this whole thing, just like chronic fatigue syndrome, is feeling like a normal person, especially in the morning, makes one think that one is fine, and then one proceeds to act as one used to, and then one crashes. So I am going to record this episode, and then I am going back to bed for the rest of the day, because I want to stop with the crashing is what I want to do. Learning how the rhythm of this long COVID thing works is just ridiculous. But I used to be a smart person. I can do this, I think. So, what I did some things. I did some things for Christmas presents. I did Kawandi, which I talked about before I left for Christmas. I've made so far 4 Kawandi. I have another 4 to do for family members, and then 1 to do for Tracy, which we just talked about this morning. So yeah, in the show notes, you will be able to see pictures of the Kawandi. And then I also went back to my roots, I felt like, and made a Clapotis for my mom out of a koigu. I think is it called Silk Garden? It's the one that's wool and silk mixed together, which is lovely for a Clapotis. It drapes very nicely in. And it was really fun to go back and do a Clapotis again. I'd forgotten how brilliant that pattern is, and also how pleasant it is once you kind of figure out the math of it. And I use way more markers than they tell you to in the pattern. I also use Nanette the Nanny's what to do at the end of a row instruction, which I think went out in a CraftLit newsletter 1,000 years ago. I will see if we can find that for the next CraftLit newsletter and do kind of a callback to those instructions, because I did a lot of photographing and picture making and stuff like that. Yeah, that has to still be in MailChimp somewhere. We'll see if we can find that. Either way, it is an edging that I use all the time now, and boy, have the edges of my knitted projects just looked so much better since I started doing that like 9 years ago. So thank you, Nanette. I also had a very odd encounter with leather, which is a weird way to start a sentence, Heather. So you know how I've been taking early morning walks, or at least I had been taking early morning walks during the pandemic and post. One of those days when I was walking through Lambertville, New Jersey, somebody had left a bunch of craft supplies out on the street in a box, like, free, take me. And, you know, you've just got to look, because there might be some goodies there. And there were, but the one that I remember most clearly, and the one that I know for certain I got out of this box, was a roll of kind of thick leather, like maybe 3 millimeters thick. It's not nothing. And it had been cut into, and it, it wasn't like straight edges left or anything like that, but it was a good piece of leather. And I've been using it to make leather thimbles for myself. And I can share a picture of them with you. I've been thinking about trying to figure out, honestly, how to make it possible for people to measure their fingers so that I could put these up in the shop, because they're not that hard to make. And boy, am I happy with how it's working. So, anywho, it's just like with the Kawandi needle pushing tube. I never did figure out a name for that. If it's a thing out there in sewing land and you know what these things are called, please let me know. I will put a picture of these in the show notes as well. So because I am a crazy person and my ADD brain is June bugging all over the place, I saw on the interwebs somewhere a picture of a leather dice bag for Dungeons and Dragons dice, but it's made as a big leather D20 die. And I made them. I made 2 of them. I used the very used Cricut machine that I'd bought off of one of Thing One's friends. She's getting a much newer and fancy schmancy version. I am very happy with what this Cricut can do. I don't need more than that. It's lovely. But I used it to score the leather. I used it to draw the numbers on the leather. And I managed to get it to cut some of the leather. It always eventually snagged. I've tried everything, including gaffer's tape, so it id what it id. It worked fine. X-Acto knives and metal rulers make cutting leather really super easy. And then I had a crocodile, one of the hole punches / grommet attachers. And I used both the small hole and the big hole, and I was able to make this thing twice. I was so excited. I have a little video of it that will be in the show notes so you can see it spinning in the window. It's very hard to show what it looks like if it's not spinning. So that will be available for you to see as well. So yeah, I made some things. And just to freak you out, since I mentioned Thing 1, I don't remember if I told you that Thing 2 applied to and got into Pratt University, the art school in Brooklyn, which also has a New York campus that's further out. And I'm fairly certain that that's the one that Aiden is going to go to for the first 2 years. It's smaller. It's quieter. These are good things. I'm so super stoked and excited. And just to freak y'all out, if you've been listening for a while, you remember when Aiden was 2.5 when I started this podcast. Aiden's 20th birthday is Saturday, the day after this episode posts. So I'm trying to come to terms with that as I lie there in bed going, what? Wait, what? So yeah, exciting time here in snowy, finally, currently, we have some snowy Pennsylvania. What else do I need to tell you? I need to tell you that next Thursday, so the Thursday after this episode airs, is our January movie night for our Patreon patrons who are at the Mina Harker level or above. And remember, you can adjust your pledge level depending on whether you want to go to the book party one month or whether you want to go to a movie watching party on another month. This movie came up several times in conversations on Thursday night Zooms over the last year. And then Thing One and Andrew watched it not too long ago, and listening to Aaron's response to how kind of overwhelming the satire is in just its kind of prescience and also the artistry of making this movie. It is Stanley Kubrick. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Love the Bomb. It is timely. Once again, at some point we're going to have to watch The Manchurian Candidate too, because, that dude. Good movies. So Dr. Strangelove will be January 25th, Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. I hope you can tune in with us. We have a chat window going, so we'll watch the movie all together, and then we have a little chat window on the side so that we can make snarky comments to each other, which is always fun. And then the book party for patrons at the Jane Eyre level and above, the book party in February is going to be A Brilliant Life by my Australian friend, Rochelle Unreich, and she is going to be there with us. It'll be noon the next day for her when we do it. But that one I cannot do on a Thursday the way we normally do. So instead of it being on February 29th, it is Wednesday, February 28th. It'll be at 7 o'clock on Wednesday, 7 o'clock Eastern. That's because Rochelle is going to be flying to a authors conference where Pulitzer Prize winners are going to show up and stuff. So she's going to have to go hang with slackers. I mean, it's not as good as hanging with us, but it's something to keep her occupied while she is press junketing around and sharing this beautiful book. The book is a biography of her mother, who I had a chance to meet and who was just lovely. One of those bright lights in a dark world kind of people. And when you read the book, and you can listen to it too, Rachel Griffiths did the audiobook version and she did a beautiful job. When you listen to the book, it is very clear that she had always been a bright light in this crazy world. And happily, Rochelle inherited that same inner glow. So I am super excited to get to introduce you guys to my friend of Jeepers, 35 years. Wow. Yeah. So super duper excited about that. The only other thing I have to announce is that if all goes well and nothing falls apart, I will be releasing an actual video essay on the YouTube channel, hopefully the same day that this episode airs. That video will go up on YouTube. And it's a big deal for me. I don't usually do things like this, but this topic really, I thought, could use a teacher's point of view. If you are at all tuned into YouTube or the LGBTQIA part of YouTube or BookTube even, you probably heard about H. Bomber Guy's plagiarism video. And it's epic. It's 4 hours long, which sounds like, who would do that to themselves? That's like longer than Gandhi, the movie. And the answer is nobody watches it straight through. And you really don't need to watch it straight through. It's segmented already, and it makes it very easy to kind of pick up and keep going. It's also not something that you have to watch necessarily, although he makes it very fun to watch. Really what you're there for is his commentary, because he does the most spectacular explanation of plagiarism and indictment of plagiarism that I think I've ever seen or come across in general. It's always very hard to explain why plagiarism is so bad in the classroom, and I had to explain it as theft. You're stealing somebody else's words that they put in that particular order that mean this particular thing. And in a world where music gets sampled, that can be a very razor's edge kind of thing to contemplate. It is not a razor's edge any longer. H Bomber guy, his real name is Harris, but he's been on YouTube since he was, I think, 10. So his original name was H Bomber guy because he was a gamer. So there it is. He does a magnificent job of explaining what plagiarism is, how you can see it when it's happening, and why it is so enormously destructive, and also why so much of it happens on YouTube and how easy it is to get away with it on YouTube. I have been very heartened to see how people have responded to his video. My response, like I said, is definitely from a teacher's point of view. And I'm not going to say anything more than that. It's teacher's point of view for everyone. I'm not talking to teachers. I'm just talking as a teacher. And I look forward to seeing what comments we get from y'all on the video. I'm very excited. It's a big deal. So that's all the things. So before we get to the chapters for today, I have 2 Three Musketeers voicemails for you, which we are going to play back to back so that you can hear them all, because there are good and important things that listener Alex has to say. Yeah, I'm just going to play them, and then I have a couple things to throw in there afterwards. But let's listen to Alex's commentary on her catch-up listening around the holidays. Here we go.
Hi, Heather. This is Alex, au fil des jours en Ravelry. And this is a long one, so just brace yourself. I just finished a big post-holiday catch-up of episodes 639 to 643, and I have a few comments and reactions to these. In Chapter 48, Episode 639, you said you really liked the moment when D'Artagnan decided not to hug Planchet, because the desire to hug was showing some nice affection between men, and you suggested his reticence had to do with hugging being too womanly of a look. But I thought something different. I thought that his reason not to hug Planchet was rather that if some of the cardinal's spies saw him acting super excited around Planchet after he had been away for 2 weeks, then the cardinal would be more likely to suspect that some kind of a political plot was moving along. How do I say this? The cardinal would suspect that to be a sign of a successfully advancing political plot. And so it was to maintain secrecy. Now on to episode 640. Heather, you talked about having your chimney swept for the first time in many years and not knowing that there even were chimney sweeps in America. Oh my goodness. Growing up in New England in a house primarily heated by wood stoves, we had our chimney swept every single year. It was considered basic fire safety to get all that sticky, flammable crud off the inside of your chimney. I do hope you got some good advice from the chimney sweep about how often this job needs to be done, and please do what they tell you. Also in episode 640, you talk about the French term fauteuil. That is simply an armchair in current usage. With appropriate adjectival modifiers, it's also the word used for a rocking chair, a club chair, a wicker chair, a seat at the theater, a wheelchair, which is literally called a rolling chair, fauteuil roulant, and a recliner, delightfully called fauteuil relax, and more. Finally, I just listened to episode 643 with chapters 54 to 55, and I'm loving the thrill of watching Milady practice her seductive arts so calculatingly and fearing at every turn that she will succeed. Me fearing. She's not fearing. She's hoping. You commented about where Lord de Winter describes her actions as comedy, then tragedy, then melancholy. And you wondered whether the word melancholy might be better translated as melodrama. And I looked around and did not find any French dictionary that translated the word that way. And I did find a French definition of melodrama that to me seems equivalent to the English definition. Melodrama being a narrative characterized by characters who experience acute emotions, alternating between moments of happiness and distress, and a constant sense of menace that the worst will happen, as compared to melancholy, which would be more of a listless feeling of sadness and hopelessness. So, from the point of view of the readers, I think what is going on in her imprisonment definitely reads as melodrama, although the moments of happiness seem to be more on the side of Lord de Winter and not Milady, but definitely that sense of all might go well or all might go wrong. But I think that what de Winter as a character is seeing and referring to on the part of Milady alone does not quite match the definition of melodrama. So to go through her behavior while imprisoned, the phase that de Winter called comedy, I think, is her fits of rage at the very beginning and her ridiculously transparent attempt at deception, where she pretends to faint and then wake up and pretends to be sick and then refuses a doctor because she doesn't want her bluff called. I think the phase that de Winter thought of as tragedy was when she was making those energetic displays of sadness and suffering, pretending to be very pious, having fits of sobbing in front of Felton, and generally making a great show of fervent praying and sad singing. On the morning of the third day of her imprisonment, the text tells us that she had been trying to be silent and dignified in front of de Winter, while hoping to provoke him into contrasting threats and violence. De Winter comes upon her silently looking out the window, and this is when he made the comment about comedy, tragedy, and melancholy. I think in this context, melancholy really just means resigned and listless sadness. And let's see what else. I'm belatedly starting the 12 Days of CraftLit series next. Hi, Heather. This is Alex again with part 2 of my lengthy message. I was just starting to say that I'm belatedly starting the 12 Days of CraftLit series next, and I can't wait to enjoy all those stories. And the 12 Days of Christmas are not over yet, so I don't think I'm too late. I did hear you talk in one of those earlier episodes I listened to today about patrons sponsoring patrons. And I looked around the CraftLit website page and the Patreon page, and I couldn't find any mention or links to how to sign up to do that. I hope your tech helpers can work on that soon, so that those of us who want to encourage and support other patrons can do that. Thanks again for all the thought and care you put into CraftLit. I hope you and all the listeners have a happy and healthy or healthier 2024. Bye-bye.
So I was kind of chastened thinking about, wow, how did I not know that there were still chimney cleaners, chimney sweeps? And the answer is, while we have lived in places where there have been chimneys, fireplaces that worked, the only place that we used the fireplace to heat with was our previous place here in Pennsylvania. And the landlord of that place, his dad or grandfather built the house that we were in, and there was one big wood-burning stove at the back of the living room, and that was, for the most part, the heating in the place. And so, yes, we did use that, but he lived next door. So if there was any chimney maintenance that happened, it happened without us really paying any attention to it. So yeah, and now the place that we're in, we're fairly certain that the landlady has never really thought very much about cleaning the chimneys. So we were very, very happy when Andrew found this guy and called him in, and he was lovely, just lovely, and did a slam bang job. It drafts much better now. So I feel both chastened and also smarter, and I love that. I loved Alix's take on the intelligence behind D'Artagnan's bro moment of not hugging Planchet, being emotional, but still like, no, you can't touch in public. I thought that her take on it was dead on and very, very smart. I also was fascinated to get the breakdown on the comedy, tragedy, and melancholy read of that scene. It helps so much to know that things are being translated the way that they're being translated and why, and if they're accurate. Because with the Victorian translations, it's always kind of a crapshoot. But it's true. I had been thinking of De Winter's commenting on this as commenting on Milady's behavior instead of his behavior in relationship to and kind of sparring with Milady. And I like Alix's take on it. So thank you for calling in. I appreciate it. Always good to learn more. And chapters 61 and 62 of the Three Musketeers. We left off before with the Three Musketeers musketeering. They were getting away with having basically fooled Richelieu by naming his mistresses in place of the real person who they were reading a letter from, who let them know that Madame Bonacieux was in a convent, and so now they know where she is and they know where to go. So last week in chapter 60, we reenacted D'Artagnan's response to seeing Rochefort, the bad guy, in the hat, the mustache twirler, the actual mustache twirler in the story, the one who is actually made up and not a historical figure. They are on their way to find Constance, and wham bip, they get stuck with D'Artagnan chasing after Rochefort because they have seen him, or D'Artagnan has anyway. So we know Milady has left John Felton in the lurch and is on her way back to France, and we know that the Musketeers are going to converge with her in the convent where Constance is being hidden. So today, I'll just give you a heads up. Today's chapters are mostly chessboard moves. It's people getting themselves lined up for the next bit of action. That doesn't mean that these aren't important chapters or that they are boring chapters. In fact, they are super important chapters and give us some marvelous Milady characterization. She is really one of the best written, most complicated villain characters I can think of. And every time I listen, especially to this last third of the book, every time I listen to how she figures out what to do and how to do it, I'm just blown away. She is so, so smart. So that's everything. That's everything you need to know. Except actually for one thing. When Milady she's going to bring up the names of two men, Putange and Dujar. When she brings these people up, you need to note that the first was just a massive opponent of Richelieu. And the second was the Queen's master of horse, so allied with the Queen. So one is definitely anti-Richelieu and one is definitely pro-Queen. And that will make, I think, what she is saying resonate more better for you. So here we go. Let's listen to chapters 61 and 62 of The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. If you are listening to your own version of it, you can skip ahead to 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 37 seconds. All right, here we go.
Chapter 61 of the D'Artagnan Romances, Volume 1, The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, translated by William Robson. The Carmelite Convent at Bethune. Great criminals bear about them a kind of predestination, which makes them surmount all obstacles, which makes them escape all dangers, up to the moment which a wearied Providence has marked as the rock of their impious fortunes. It was thus with Milady. She escaped the cruisers of both nations and arrived at Boulogne without accident. When landing at Portsmouth, Milady was an Englishwoman whom the persecutions of the French drove from La Rochelle. When landing at Boulogne after 2 days' passage, she passed for a Frenchwoman whom the English persecuted at Portsmouth out of their hatred for France. Milady had likewise the best of passports, her beauty, her noble appearance, and the liberality with which she distributed her pistoles. Freed from the usual formalities by the affable smile and gallant manners of an old governor of the port, who kissed her hand, she only remained long enough at Boulogne to put into a post a letter conceived in the following terms: "To His Eminence Monseigneur the Cardinal Richelieu, in his camp before La Rochelle. Monseigneur, let your Eminence be reassured. His Grace the Duke of Buckingham will not set out for France. Milady de Boulogne, evening of the 25th. P.S. According to the desire of your Eminence, I report to the convent of the Carmelites at Bethune, where I will await your orders." Accordingly, that same evening Milady commenced her journey. Night overtook her. She stopped and slept at an inn. At 5 o'clock the next morning she again proceeded, and in 3 hours after entered Bethune. She inquired for the convent of the Carmelites and went thither immediately. The superior met her. Milady showed her the cardinal's order. The abbess assigned her a chamber and had breakfast served. All the past was effaced from the eyes of this woman, and her looks, fixed on the future, beheld nothing but the high fortunes reserved for her by the cardinal, whom she had so successfully served without his name being in any way mixed up with the sanguinary affair. The ever-new passions which consumed her gave to her life the appearance of those clouds which float in the heavens, reflecting sometimes azure, sometimes fire, sometimes the opaque blackness of the tempest, and which leave no traces upon the earth behind them but devastation and death. After breakfast the abbess came to pay her a visit. There is very little amusement in the cloister, and the good superior was eager to make the acquaintance of her new boarder. Milady wished to please the abbess. This was a very easy matter for a woman so really superior as she was. She tried to be agreeable, and she was charming, winning the good superior by her varied conversation and by the graces of her whole personality. The abbess, who was the daughter of a noble house, took particular delight in stories of the court, which so seldom travel to the extremities of the kingdom, and which above all have so much difficulty in penetrating the walls of convents, at whose threshold the noise of the world dies away. Milady, on the contrary, was quite conversant with all aristocratic intrigues, amid which she had constantly lived for 5 or 6 years. She made it her business, therefore, to amuse the good abbess with the worldly practices of the court of France, mixed with the eccentric pursuits of the king. She made for her the scandalous chronicle of the lords and ladies of the court, whom the abbess knew perfectly by name, touched lightly on the amours of the queen and the Duke of Buckingham, talking a great deal to induce her auditor to talk a little. But the abbess contented herself with listening and smiling, without replying a word. Milady, however, saw that this sort of narrative amused her very much, and kept at it, only she now let her conversation drift toward the cardinal. But she was greatly embarrassed. She did not know whether the abbess was a royalist or a cardinalist. She therefore confined herself to a prudent middle course. But the abbess, on her part, maintained a reserve still more prudent, contenting herself with making a profound inclination of the head every time the fair traveler pronounced the name of his Eminence. Milady began to think she should soon grow weary of a convent life. She resolved then to risk something in order that she might know how to act afterward. Desirous of seeing how far the discretion of the good abbess would go, she began to tell a story, obscure at first, but very circumstantial afterward, about the cardinal, relating the amours of the minister with Madame d'Aiguillon, Marion de Lorme, and several other gay women. The abbess listened more attentively, grew animated by degrees, and smiled. "Good," thought Milady. "She takes pleasure in my conversation. If she is a cardinalist, she has no fanaticism at least." She then went on to describe the persecutions exercised by the cardinal upon his enemies. The abbess only crossed herself without approving or disapproving. This confirmed Milady in her opinion that the abbess was rather royalist than cardinalist, Milady therefore continued, coloring her narrations more and more. "I am very ignorant of these matters," said the abbess at length, "but however distant from the court we may be, however remote from the interests of the world we may be placed, we have very sad examples of what you have related, and one of our boarders has suffered much from the vengeance and persecution of the cardinal."
"One of your boarders?" said Milady. "Oh, my God! Poor woman! I pity her, then."
"And you have reason, for she is much to be pitied. Imprisonment, menaces, ill treatment, she has suffered everything. But after all," resumed the abbess, "Monsieur Cardinal has perhaps plausible motives for acting thus, and though she has the look of an angel, we must not always judge people by the appearance."
"Good," said Milady to herself. "Who knows? I am about, perhaps, to discover something here. I am in the vein."
She tried to give her countenance an appearance of perfect candor.
"Alas," said Milady, "I know it is so. It is said that we must not trust to the face. But in what, then, shall we place confidence, if not in the most beautiful work of the Lord? As for me, I shall be deceived all of my life, perhaps, but I shall always have faith in a person whose countenance inspires me with sympathy."
"You would, then, be tempted to believe," said the abbess, "that this young person is innocent?"
"The cardinal pursues not only crimes," said she. "There are certain virtues which he pursues more severely than certain offenses."
"Permit me, madame, to express my surprise," said the abbess.
"At what?"
said Milady with the utmost ingenuousness. "At the language you use."
"What do you find so astonishing in that language?"
said Milady, smiling. "You are the friend of the cardinal, for he sends you hither, and yet—"
"And yet I speak ill of him,"
replied Milady, finishing the thought of the superior. "At least you don't speak well of him."
"That is because I am not his friend," said she, sighing, "but his victim."
"But this letter in which he recommends you to me?"
"Is in order for me to confine myself to a sort of prison, from which he will release me by one of his satellites."
"But why have you not fled?"
"Whither should I go? Do you believe there is a spot on the earth which the cardinal cannot reach, if he takes the trouble to stretch forth his hand? If I were a man, that would barely be possible. But what can a woman do? This young boarder of yours, has she tried to fly?"
"No, that is true. But that is another thing. I believe she is detained in France by some love affair."
"Ah," said Milady with a sigh, "if she loves, she is not altogether wretched."
"Then," said the abbess, looking at Milady with increasing interest, "I behold another poor victim?"
"Alas, yes,"
said Milady. The abbess looked at her for an instant with uneasiness, as if a fresh thought suggested itself to her mind. "You are not an enemy of our holy faith?" said she hesitatingly.
"Who? I?"
cried Milady.
"I, a Protestant? Oh, no! I call to witness the God who hears us, that on the contrary I am a fervent Catholic."
"Then, madame," said the abbess, smiling, "be reassured. The house in which you are shall not be a very hard prison, and we will do all in our power to make you cherish your captivity.
You will find here, moreover, the young woman of whom I spoke, who is persecuted, no doubt, in consequence of some court intrigue. She is amiable and well behaved."
"What is her name?"
"She was sent to me by someone of high rank, under the name of Kitty. I have tried not to discover her other name."
"Kitty?" cried Milady. "What? Are you sure?"
"That she is called so? Yes, madame. Do you know her?"
Milady smiled to herself at the idea which had occurred to her, that this might be her old chambermaid. There was connected with the remembrance of this girl a remembrance of anger, and a desire of vengeance disordered the features of Milady, which, however, immediately recovered the calm and benevolent expression which this woman of 100 faces had for a moment allowed them to lose.
"And when can I see this young lady, for whom I already feel so great a sympathy?"
asked Milady.
"Why, this evening," said the abbess. "Today even, but you have been traveling these 4 days, as you told me yourself. This morning you rose at 5 o'clock. You must stand in need of repose. Go to bed and sleep. At dinner time we will rouse you."
Although Milady would very willingly have gone without sleep, sustained as she was by all the excitements which a new adventure awakened in her heart, ever thirsting for intrigues, she nevertheless accepted the offer of the superior. During the last 15 days she had experienced so many and such various emotions that if her frame of iron was still capable of supporting fatigue, her mind required repose. She therefore took leave of the abbess and went to bed, softly rocked by the ideas of vengeance, which the name of Kitty had naturally brought to her thoughts. She remembered that almost unlimited promise which the cardinal had given her if she succeeded in her enterprise. She had succeeded. D'Artagnan was then in her power. One thing alone frightened her. That was the remembrance of her husband, the Comte de la Fère, whom she had believed dead, or at least expatriated, and whom she found again in Athos, the best friend of D'Artagnan. But alas, if he was the friend of D'Artagnan, he must have lent him his assistance in all the proceedings by whose aid the queen had defeated the project of his Eminence. If he was the friend of D'Artagnan, he was the enemy of the cardinal, and she doubtless would succeed in involving him in the vengeance by which she hoped to destroy the young Musketeer. All these hopes were so many sweet thoughts for Milady. So rocked by them, she soon fell asleep. She was awakened by a soft voice which sounded at the foot of her bed. She opened her eyes and saw the abbess, accompanied by a young woman with light hair and delicate complexion, who fixed upon her a look full of benevolent curiosity. The face of the young woman was entirely unknown to her. Each examined the other with great attention, while exchanging the customary compliments. Both were very handsome, but of quite different styles of beauty. Milady, however, smiled in observing that she excelled the young woman by far in her high air and aristocratic bearing. It is true that the habit of a novice, which the young woman wore, was not very advantageous in a contest of this kind. The abbess introduced them to each other. When this formality was ended, as her duties called her to chapel, she left the 2 young women alone. The novice, seeing Milady in bed, was about to follow the example of the superior, but Milady stopped her.
"How, madame?" said she. "I have scarcely seen you, and you already wish to deprive me of your company, upon which I had counted a little, I must confess, for the time I have to pass here." "No, madame," replied the novice, "only I thought I had chosen my time ill. You were asleep. You are fatigued." "Well," said Milady, "what can those who sleep wish for? A happy awakening? This awakening you have given me. Allow me, then, to enjoy it at my ease."
And taking her hand, she drew her toward the armchair by the bedside. The novice sat down.
"How unfortunate I am," said she. "I have been here 6 months without the shadow of recreation. You arrive, and your presence was likely to afford me delightful company. Yet I expect, in all probability, to quit the convent at any moment." "How? You are going soon?" asked Milady. "At least I hope so," said the novice, with an expression of joy which she made no effort to disguise. "I think I learned you had suffered persecutions from the cardinal," continued Milady. "That would have been another motive for sympathy between us." "What I have heard, then, from our good mother is true. You have likewise been a victim of that wicked priest." "Hush!" said Milady. "Let us not, even here, speak thus of him. All my misfortunes arise from my having said nearly what you have said before a woman whom I thought my friend, and who betrayed me. Are you also the victim of a treachery?" "No," said the novice, "but of my devotion, of a devotion to a woman I loved, for whom I would have laid down my life, for whom I would give it still." "And who has abandoned you? Is that it?" "I have been sufficiently unjust to believe so, but during the last 2 or 3 days I have obtained proof to the contrary, for which I thank God, for it would have cost me very dear to think she had forgotten me. But you, madame, you appear to be free," continued the novice, "and if you were inclined to fly, it only rests with yourself to do so." "Whither would you have me go? Without friends, without money, in a part of France with which I am unacquainted, and where I have never been before?" "Oh," cried the novice, "as to friends, you would have them wherever you want. You appear so good and are so beautiful." "That does not prevent," replied Milady, softening her smile so as to give it an angelic expression, "my being alone or being persecuted." "Hear me," said the novice. "We must trust in heaven. There always comes a moment when the good you have done pleads your cause before God. And see, perhaps it is a happiness for you, humble and powerless as I am, that you have met with me. For if I leave this place, well, I have powerful friends who, after having exerted themselves on my account, may also exert themselves for you." "Oh, when I said I was alone," said Milady, hoping to make the novice talk by talking of herself, "it is not for want of friends in high places, but these friends themselves tremble before the cardinal. The queen herself does not dare to oppose the terrible minister. I have proof that her Majesty, notwithstanding her excellent heart, has more than once been obliged to abandon to the anger of his Eminence persons who had served her. Trust me, madame, the queen may appear to have abandoned those persons, but we must not put faith in appearances. The more they are persecuted, the more she thinks of them, and often, when they least expect it, they have proof of a kind remembrance." "Alas," said Milady, "I believe so. The queen is so good." "Oh, you know her, then, that lovely and noble queen, that you speak of her thus?" cried the novice with enthusiasm. "That is to say," replied Milady, driven into her entrenchment, "that I have not the honor of knowing her personally, but I know a great number of her most intimate friends. I am acquainted with Monsieur de Putange. I met Monsieur du Hart in England. I know Monsieur de Tréville." "Monsieur de Tréville!" exclaimed the novice. "Do you know Monsieur de Tréville?" "Yes, perfectly well, intimately even." "The captain of the King's Musketeers?" "The captain of the King's Musketeers." "Why, then, only see!" cried the novice. "We shall soon be well acquainted, almost friends. If you know Monsieur de Tréville, you must have visited him." "Often," said Milady, who, having entered this track and perceiving that falsehood succeeded, was determined to follow it to the end. "With him? Then you must have seen some of his Musketeers?" "All those he is in the habit of receiving,"
replied Milady, for whom this conversation began to have a real interest.
"Name a few of those whom you know, and you will see if they are my friends." "Well," said Milady, embarrassed, "I know Monsieur de Louvigny, Monsieur de Courtivron, Monsieur de Faroussac." The novice let her speak, then seeing that she paused, she said, "Don't you know a gentleman named Athos?"
Milady became as pale as the sheets in which she was lying, and mistress as she was of herself, she could not help uttering a cry, seizing the hand of the novice and devouring her with looks.
"What's the matter? Good God!" asked the poor woman. "Have I said anything that has wounded you?" "No, but the name struck me, because I also have known that gentleman, and it appeared strange to me to meet with a person who appears to know him well." "Oh, yes, very well. Not only him, but some of his friends, Messieurs Porthos and Aramis." "Indeed, you know them likewise?" "I know them," cried Milady, who began to feel a chill penetrate her heart. "Well, if you know them, you know that they are good and free companions. Why do you not apply to them if you stand in need of help?" "That is to say," stammered Milady, "I am not really very intimate with any of them. I know them from having heard one of their friends, Monsieur d'Artagnan, say a great deal about them." "You know Monsieur d'Artagnan?"
cried the novice, in her turn seizing the hands of Milady and devouring her with her eyes. Then, remarking the strange expression of Milady's countenance, she said, "Pardon me, madame, you know him by what title?" "Why," replied Milady, embarrassed, "why, by the title of friend." "You deceive me, madam," said the novice. "You have been his mistress." "It is you who have been his mistress, madame," cried Milady in her turn. "I?" said the novice. "Yes, you. I know you now. You are Madame Bonacieux." The young woman drew back, filled with surprise and terror. "Oh, do not deny it. Answer," continued Milady. "Well, yes, madame," said the novice. "Are we rivals?" The countenance of Milady was illumined by so savage a joy that under any other circumstances Madame Bonacieux would have fled in terror, but she was absorbed by jealousy. "Speak, madame," resumed Madame Bonacieux with an energy of which she might not have been believed capable. "Have you been, or are you, his mistress?" "Oh, no," cried Milady, with an accent that admitted no doubt of her truth. "Never, never." "I believe you," said Madame Bonacieux, "but why then did you cry out so?" "Do you not understand?" said Milady, who had already overcome her agitation and recovered her presence of mind. "How can I understand? I know nothing." "Can you not understand that Monsieur d'Artagnan, being my friend, might take me into his confidence?" "Truly?" "Do you not perceive that I know all? Your abduction from the little house at Saint-Germain, his despair, that of his friends, and their useless inquiries up to this moment. How could I help be astonished when, without having the least expectation of such a thing, I meet you face to face? You, of whom we have so often spoken together, you, whom he loves with all his soul, you, whom he had taught me to love before I had seen you. Ah, dear Constance, I have found you then. I see you at last." And Milady stretched out her arms to Madame Bonacieux, who, convinced by what she had just said, saw nothing in this woman whom an instant before she had believed her rival, but a sincere and devoted friend.
"Oh, pardon me, cried she, sinking upon the shoulders of Milady. "Pardon me, I love him so much." These two women held each other for an instant in a close embrace.
Certainly, if Milady's strength had been equal to her hatred, Madame Bonacieux would never have left that embrace alive. But not being able to stifle her, she smiled upon her.
"Oh, you beautiful, good little creature," said Milady. "How delightful I am to have found you. Let me look at you."
And while saying these words, she absolutely devoured her by her looks.
"Oh, yes, it is you indeed. From what he has told me, I know you now. I recognize you perfectly."
The poor young woman could not possibly suspect what frightful cruelty was behind the rampart of that pure brow, behind those brilliant eyes in which she read nothing but interest and compassion.
"Then you know what I have suffered?" said Madame Bonacieux. "Since he has told you what he has suffered, but to suffer for him is happiness."
Milady replied mechanically,
"Yes, that is happiness."
She was thinking of something else.
"Ah, then,"
continued Madame Bonacieux,
"my punishment is drawing to a close. Tomorrow, this evening perhaps, I shall see him again, and then the past will no longer exist." "This evening?"
asked Milady, roused from her reverie by these words.
"What do you mean? Do you expect news from him?" "I expect himself." "Himself? D'Artagnan? Here? Himself? But that's impossible. He is at the siege of La Rochelle with the cardinal. He will not return till after taking the city." "Ah, you fancy so? But is there anything impossible for my D'Artagnan, the noble and loyal gentleman?" "Oh, I cannot believe you." "Well, read then,"
said the unhappy young woman, in the excess of her pride and joy, presenting a letter to Milady.
"The writing of Madame de Chevreuse," said Milady to herself. "Ah, I always thought there was some secret understanding in that quarter."
And she greedily read the following few lines. "My dear child, hold yourself ready. Our friend will see you soon, and he will only see you to release you from that imprisonment in which your safety required you should be concealed. Prepare, then, for your departure, and never despair of us. Our charming Gascon has just proved himself as brave and faithful as ever. Tell him that certain parties are grateful for the warning he has given."
"Yes, yes," said Milady. "The letter is precise. Do you know what that warning was?" "No, I only suspect he has warned the queen against some fresh machinations of the cardinal." "Yes, that's it, no doubt," said Milady, returning the letter to Madame Bonacieux and letting her head sink pensively upon her bosom.
At that moment they heard the gallop of a horse.
"Oh!" cried Madame Bonacieux, darting to the window. "Can it be he?"
Milady remained still in bed, petrified by surprise. So many unexpected things happened to her all at once that for the first time she was at a loss.
He, murmured she. "Can it be he?"
And she remained in bed with her eyes fixed.
"Alas, no," said Madame Bonacieux. "It is a man I don't know, although he seems to be coming here. Yes, he checks his pace. He stops at the gate. He rings."
Milady sprang out of bed.
"You are sure it is not he?" said she. "Yes, yes, very sure." "Perhaps you did not see well." "Oh, if I were to see the plume of his hat, the end of his cloak, I should know him."
Milady was dressing herself all the time.
"Yes, he has entered." "It is for you or me." "My God, how agitated you seem." "Yes, I admit it. I have not your confidence. I fear the cardinal." "Hush," said Madame Bonacieux. "Somebody is coming."
Immediately the door opened and the superior entered.
"Do you come from Boulogne?" demanded she of Milady.
"Yes," replied she, trying to recover her self-possession. "Who wants me?"
"A man who will not tell his name. but who comes from the cardinal."
And who wishes to speak with me?"
"Who wishes to speak to a lady recently come from Boulogne."
"Then let him come in, if you please." "Oh, my God, my God!" cried Madame Bonacieux. "Can it be bad news?" "I fear it. I will leave you with this stranger, but as soon as he is gone, if you will permit me, I will return." "Permit you? I beseech you!"
The superior and Madame Bonacieux retired. Milady remained alone with her eyes fixed upon the door. An instant later the jingling of spurs was heard upon the stairs. Steps drew near, the door opened, and a man appeared. Milady uttered a cry of joy. This man was the Comte de Rochefort, the demoniacal tool of his Eminence. End of chapter 61. Chapter 62 of the D'Artagnan Romances, Volume 1, The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas, translated by William Robson. Two varieties of demons.
"Ah!"
cried Milady and Rochefort together.
"It is you."
"Yes, it is I."
"And you come?"
asked Milady.
"From La Rochelle. And you?"
"From England."
"Buckingham?"
"Dead, or desperately wounded, as I left without having been able to hear anything of him. A fanatic has just assassinated him."
"Ah," said Rochefort with a smile, "this is a fortunate chance, one that will delight his Eminence. Have you informed him of it?"
"I wrote to him from Boulogne. But what brings you here?"
"His Eminence was uneasy, and sent me to find you."
"I only arrived yesterday."
"And what have you been doing since yesterday?"
"I have not lost my time."
"Oh, I don't doubt that."
"Do you know whom I have encountered here?"
"No."
"Guess."
"How can I?"
"That young woman whom the Queen took out of prison."
"The mistress of that fellow D'Artagnan?"
"Yes, Madame Bonacieux, with whose retreat the cardinal was unacquainted."
"Well, well," said Rochefort, "here is a chance which may pair off with the other. Monsieur Cardinal is indeed a privileged man."
"Imagine my astonishment," continued Milady, "when I found myself face to face with this woman."
"Does she know you?"
"No."
"Then she looks upon you as a stranger?"
Milady smiled.
"I am her best friend."
"Upon my honor," said Rochefort, "it takes you, my dear Countess, to perform such miracles."
"And it is well I can, Chevalier," said Milady, "for do you know what is going on here?"
"No."
"They will come for her tomorrow or the day after with an order from the Queen."
"Indeed? And who?"
"D'Artagnan and his friends."
"Indeed. They will go so far that we shall be obliged to send them to the Bastille."
"Why is it not done already?"
"What would you? The cardinal has a weakness for these men which I cannot comprehend."
"Indeed?"
"Yes."
"Well, then tell him this, Rochefort. Tell him that our conversation at the inn of the Red Dovecot was overheard by these four men. Tell him that after his departure, one of them came up to me and took from me by violence the safe conduct which he had given me. Tell him they warned Lord de Winter of my journey to England, that this time they nearly foiled my mission as they foiled the whole affair of the studs. Tell him that among these four men two only are to be feared, D'Artagnan and Athos. Tell him that the third, Aramis, is the lover of Madame de Chevreuse. He may be left alone, we know his secret, and it may be useful. As to the fourth, Porthos, he is a fool, a simpleton, a blustering booby, not worth troubling himself about."
"But these four men must now be at the siege of La Rochelle."
I thought so too, but a letter which Madame Bonacieux has received from Madame the Constable, and which she has had the imprudence to show me, leads me to believe that these 4 men, on the contrary, are on the road hither to take her away."
"The devil! What's to be done?"
"What did the cardinal say about me?"
"I was to take your dispatches, written or verbal, and return by post, and when he shall know what you have done, he will advise what you have to do."
"I must then remain here?"
"Here or in the neighborhood."
"You cannot take me with you?"
"No, the order is imperative. Near the camp you might be recognized, and your presence, you must be aware, would compromise the cardinal."
"Then I must wait here or in the neighborhood?"
"Only tell me beforehand where you will wait for intelligence from the cardinal. Let me know always where to find you."
"Observe, it is probable that I may not be able to remain here."
"Why?"
"You forget that my enemies may arrive at any minute."
"That's true. But is this little woman, then, to escape his eminence?"
"Bah!"
said Milady with a smile that belonged only to herself.
"You forget that I am her best friend."
"Ah, that's true. I may then tell the cardinal, with respect to this little woman—"
"That he may be at ease."
"Is that all?"
"He will know what that means."
"He will guess, at least. Now, then, what had I better do?"
"Return instantly. It appears to me that the news you bear is worth the trouble of a little diligence."
"My chaise broke down coming into Lilliers."
"Capital."
"What? Capital?"
"Yes, I want your chaise."
"And how shall I travel, then?"
"On horseback."
"You talk very comfortably. 180 leagues?"
"What's that?"
"One can do it. Afterward?"
"Afterward? Why, in passing through Lilliers, you will send me your chaise with an order to your servant to place himself at my disposal."
"Well?"
"You have, no doubt, some order from the cardinal about you?"
"I have my full power."
"Show it to the abbess, and tell her that someone will come and fetch me, either today or tomorrow, and that I am to follow the person who presents himself in your name."
"Very well."
"Don't forget to treat me harshly in speaking of me to the abbess."
"To what purpose?"
"I am a victim of the cardinal. It is necessary to inspire confidence in that poor little Madame Bonacieux."
"That's true. Now, will you make me a report of all that has happened?"
"Why, I have related the events to you. You have a good memory. Repeat what I have told you. A paper may be lost."
"You are right. Only, let me know where to find you, that I may not run needlessly about the neighborhood."
"That's correct. Wait."
"Do you want a map?"
"Oh, I know this country marvelously."
"You? When were you here?"
"I was brought up here."
"Truly?"
"It is worth something, you see, to have been brought up somewhere."
"You will wait for me, then?"
"Let me reflect a little. Ah, that will do, at Armentières."
"Where is that Armentières?"
"A little town on the Lys. I shall only have to cross the river, and I shall be in a foreign country."
"Capital. But is it understood you will only cross the river in case of danger?"
"That is well understood."
"And in that case, how shall I know where you are?"
"You do not want your lackey? Is he a sure man?"
"To the proof."
"Give him to me. Nobody knows him. I will leave him at the place I quit, and he will conduct you to me."
"And you say you will wait for me at Armentières?"
"At Armentières."
"Write that name on a bit of paper. Lest I should forget it, there is nothing compromising in the name of a town. Is it not so?
Who knows? Never mind, said Milady, writing the name on half a sheet of paper. I will compromise myself.
Well,
said Rochefort, taking the paper from Milady, folding it, and placing it in the lining of his hat.
you may be easy. I will do as children do, for fear of losing the paper. Repeat the name along the route. Now, is that all?
I believe so.
Let us see. Buckingham dead or grievously wounded. Your conversation with the cardinal overheard by the Four Musketeers. Lord de Winter warned of your arrival at Portsmouth. D'Artagnan and Athos to the Bastille. Aramis, the lover of Madame de Chevreuse. Porthos, an ass. Madame Bonacieux found again. To send you the chaise as soon as possible. To place my lackey at your disposal. To make you out a victim of the cardinal in order that the abbess may entertain no suspicion. Armentières, on the bank of the Lys. Is that all, then?
In truth, my dear Chevalier, you are a miracle of memory. Apropos, add one thing.
What?
I saw some very pretty woods which almost touch the convent garden. Say that I am permitted to walk in those woods. Who knows? Perhaps I shall stand in need of a back door for retreat.
You think of everything.
And you forget one thing.
What?
To ask me if I want money.
That's true. How much do you want?
All you have in gold.
I have 500 pistoles, or thereabouts.
I have as much. With 1,000 pistoles, one may face everything. Empty your pockets.
There.
Right, and you go.
In an hour, time to eat a morsel, during which I shall send for a post-horse.
Capital! Adieu, Chevalier.
Adieu, Countess.
Commend me to the cardinal.
Commend me to Satan.
Milady and Rochefort exchanged a smile and separated. An hour afterward, Rochefort set out at a grand gallop. 5 hours after that he passed through Arras. Our readers already know how he was recognized by D'Artagnan, and how that recognition, by inspiring fear in the Four Musketeers, had given fresh activity to their journey. End of chapter 62.
So, whew, doggy. So, Milady and Constance, what a tour de force of manipulation on the part of Milady. And that brilliant way of kind of teasing apart, is Constance Richelieu's leaning or otherwise leaning? And that was just yummy how she did that. But then Dumas' playwriting kicks in chapter 62. I loved the dialogue between Milady and Rochefort. It was one of those chapters where it ended and I was like, wait, what? That it's over? I was having so much fun listening to them spar intelligently and dastardly with each other. It was just a fun chapter. I also loved that Rochefort does the same thing that Milady did earlier with Richelieu, where he repeats everything that is about to happen that he needs to do, so that A, he locks it into his memory, and B, he locks it into our memory too, because it's complicated. And it's a much cleverer way to hide your exposition. Get it? Hide the exposed. Yeah. So it's a much cleverer way to do that, to turn it into, let me make sure I've got this right. And then I love his write down the name of the place and then I'll eat it. There's been a lot of eating paper going on lately, because didn't we have Grimaud had to eat the letter from the cousin, the quote unquote cousin? There's a lot of paper eating happening here. I wonder if something was happening in the press at the time. Either way, yay. And then, of course, it ends beautifully with Dumas reminding us, and we know where Rochefort shows up because we know that D'Artagnan saw him and hit the road. So, yeah, we can see all the chess pieces moving into position. We're all converging. Right now, we're going to be converging on the monastery. And we'll get more of that next week. And then the week after is the end of the book. The end of the book. I know. Shocking. Shocking, shocking. Every time we come to the end of a book, it feels like, I don't know, the closing of a chapter, Heather, because it is. But you know what I mean? It's like life gets sectionalized by the books we read, or is it just me? That I remember where I was when I first read my first Kurt Vonnegut, Cat's Cradle, or heard the opening to Bleak House. You know, it's just time gets segmented by the literature for me, which is kind of cool. I really like that. Anyway, I will stop yammering at you and let you get on with your day, and then we will get on with finishing the Three Musketeers next week after the Dr. Strangelove watch party on Thursday, January 25th at 8 p.m. Eastern. And again, that's if you are on Patreon at the Mina Harker level or above. And for the book club for Rochelle Unreich's book, A Brilliant Life, that's for people at the Jane Eyre level and above. And again, you can sign up for free. You can switch your patronage as needed based on finances and what you want to have access to. And, Alix, yes, we are fixing how you can sponsor somebody who needs a Patreon sponsorship because they are in a financial situation where they can't pay themselves. And it makes me so happy that you were looking for that also. You know, people don't listen always in real time, so sometimes it's hard for me to tell what information is getting out and not landing. You know, people aren't finding it useful, or what information is just not being heard yet because you hold the episodes at bay until you can listen to a whole bunch of them in one go, which makes perfect sense to me. I would probably do the same were I you, instead of the person pacing myself